Okay, open session of the Select Board for December 11, 2019, here at beautiful Brookline High School. First, any announcements or updates? I hear we had a good election last night for the debt exclusion. Ms. Hamilton, would you like to tell the world the outcome and everything we do afterwards?
It was one very small step to addressing the school enrollment issues. But I'm very pleased with the result and looking forward to getting back to work with the school building committee.
Okay. And what she's referring to is a debt override, or the debt exclusion override for funding the Driscoll School renovation project. So, any other announcements?
Yes, been handed this notice by Kate McGilvery, who's back with us. Glad to have you here. So the 25th annual Town Hall Toy Drive is happening. For the 25th year, Town Hall is collecting gift donations to distribute to disadvantaged children who reside or go to school in Brookline. If you'd like to contribute, please bring your new unwrapped gift to the Town Council's office in the Town Hall 6th floor or one of the designated drop-off locations within the town, which can be found on the town website. For more information, please contact the office of the Town Council. Your assistance to help spread some holiday cheer is greatly appreciated. Do note that there is particular need for gifts for children ages 10 to 16, although all gifts will be welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay, any other comments, updates? Now, I apologize, Kate. This is your first meeting after your leave, and I'd like to publicly welcome you back. You know, we missed you, and we're glad that we now have your services here in our meetings and elsewhere. So, next, public comment. Yes, Ms. Dewart?
Yes, I'm Mary Dewart. I'm a town meeting
Yes,
member
I'm-
from Precinct 3. And I read with interest the Public Works Commissioner job description. And I sat on the Park and Rec Commission, and I have worked in Brookline for a long, long time, and I really appreciate the depth of that description. What came to mind as a climate activist is the unfortunate omission of the concept of sustainability as a job description. I'm sure that was an oversight. The word environment is included, but the whole piece of organizing and strategizing and being familiar with climate change and impacts for Brookline seemed like something that was missing from this job description. And I understand that this description can't be changed easily, but perhaps the ad that you put out could be changed and include information about sustainability and the kinds of things that a sustainability director would be, the Public Works Commissioner would be versant in climate change, that they would be able to articulate to staff in the town on knowledge about climate change and rising sea levels and the implications for Brookline. And we're also trying to build on what the sustainability coordinator started to develop across town departments.
I'm Kathleen Scanlon. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 3. And I just would, reiterate the work that we've seen over this last year, how important it is to get departments talking to one another and on board. It would be really important for this new person to understand this is a priority of Brookline's with the climate action plan. And also that the Human Resources Department understands that that's also a priority, that all new hires, and especially a prominent position like this, should really understand that that's a priority of Brookline.
Yeah, and I think that we're gaining a lot of ground in terms of climate understanding and preparedness through the votes at town meeting, as we've seen last week, and the importance of being able to articulate across departments and to other people and to their staff how important it is that we understand the budget concerns, the CIP concerns, the implications for the town to work on things that include electric vehicles, for example. I mean, that's something we've already started, but you know, planting trees and completing streets that include pedestrians and bikes. And the job description, you know, took on the major facet of roads, but we're working on the Complete Streets program as well, and how we can all work together on climate change. There's water consumption and gas leaks and social media and website promotion that can help as well.
What's the context within which environment is mentioned there?
The context is,
And why isn't that, doesn't
well,
that cover?
it's not, to my mind, it's not strongly included. I mean, environment could be anything from, you know, grass mowing to tree planting in a simple, sort of routine way, but I'm hoping that we can have someone in that position who shows leadership and understanding and ability to articulate to the town and to other departments the big role that DPW plays in our sustainability aspiration.
Do you have anything?
Well, I know our policy on public comment is not to respond, but I think it's very good. Your points are very well taken, and I will work on that. The other thing I would say is this will involve a panel of resident stakeholders, of which I'm sure there will be a member of advocates of that. But yeah, we will improve the ad to reflect more about the town's priorities and how it relates to public works.
So much. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear this perspective, and I know we're making great strides in Brookline, and I'm looking forward to seeing that continue and fulfill the need to respond to the fact that I think I heard recently that there are 2,000, the equivalent of melting ice in Greenland is equivalent to 2,000 elephants falling into the sea per every 2 seconds. So there's a really rapid rate and acceleration of understanding what's happening to our environment. And I know Brookline will step up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Benka?
Thank you, Dick Benka, and thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words about item 7 on your agenda, which is the tax classification item, and particularly the residential exemption. I actually had not, I didn't have any intention of saying anything about this. I stuck around at last week's meeting to say a thank you to Gary McCabe for his professionalism and his grace in a very difficult job. But then in the discussion that I listened to while I was waiting to talk with Gary, there was a good deal of discussion about what was regressive, what was progressive, what was less regressive. And my fundamental point here today is that if you're concerned about the impacts of the residential exemption, you have to consider the impact on renters. Basically, with the residential exemption at the levels we're talking about, 20 to 22%, any owner-occupied home or condo or other parcel under $2.3 million will benefit from the residential exemption. In fact, if you increase the residential exemption, I'll save money. So my taxes would get shifted onto rental properties if the residential exemption was increased, say from 21% to 22%. When I was on the board, I raised the issue of this regressive element in the residential exemption in the context of apartments. And you can actually see this in some of the worksheets that you have from the assessor. As the residential exemption goes up, taxes on owner-occupied single-family units go down, taxes on condos go down, but taxes on apartments increase. When we identified this issue with respect to apartments, it wasn't really troublesome because the tax on multifamily buildings gets spread over a lot of units. And we talked about it and then we kind of went past the issue, and we weren't talking about potentially increasing the residential exemption. But last Tuesday's presentation by the assessor, and the backup information highlighted an issue that's not really presented in the data, and frankly, that I had missed previously. Brookline has over 10,000 rental units. More than 6,000 of those units are in parcels that are not owner-occupied and are not apartments. So there are more than 6,000 non-owner-occupied units in single-family homes, limited number, 4,500 in condos, and another 1,500 or so in twos and threes. Now, some of those are Airbnbs, and I really don't care about those, but according to the write-up on Article 18, there are only about 400 of those in Brookline. So out of 6,000 plus, or 10,000 if you include apartments, very small number apparently are Airbnbs. There is a packet that you have, and basically the essence of what I would like to say, I'd just like you to look on page 2 of that packet, which is the chart. This looks to the impact of the residential exemption at levels of 20%, 21%, and 22% at the median condo and the median single-family home. The exemption shifts part of the tax burden from lower-priced condos to higher-priced single-family homes. The latter paying an effective tax rate that's about a third higher than the rate on the median condo. But what it really does is it really shifts the tax burden onto rental condos and rental units. Rental condos would pay a tax, an effective tax rate that would be about 2/3 higher than an owner-occupied condo with an identically assessed value. And that, with your median condo, would be a subsidy of between $2,600 and $2,900 flowing from rental units to owner-occupied units. That same effective tax rate is paid by rental twos, threes, single-family homes, and apartments, all of whom pay the full residential tax rate because they don't get any, and non-owner occupied because they don't get any residential exemption. In short, the more you increase the residential exemption, the more you stick it to renters. The standard lease contains a tax escalator clause, and according to the Census Bureau, the median household income in Brookline for renter-occupied units is almost exactly half the median household income for owner-occupied units. So if I were interested in lessening this regressive impact, I'd actually decrease the residential exemption, maybe to 20.5% this year and to 20% next year. But whatever I did, I wouldn't increase it. And finally, I guarantee you that's not in my self-interest to make that statement. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay,
Don't go too far, though. I may have a question when we get to this.
Oh,
on the agenda.
I'll
Yeah,
wait,
please.
yes.
Thank you.
okay, approval of miscellaneous items, licenses, vouchers, and contracts. Question of granting a temporary all kinds beverages, non-sales license to Lars Anderson Auto Museum for an event to be held on Friday, December 13. I don't think there are any questions there. Police okay with that?
Yes, the police have reviewed and see no reason to deny the application.
Any questions? No? I move approval of the temporary all kinds beverages non-sales license to Lars Anderson on December 13. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, next, Mr. McCabe, you're on board. Tax classification. Question of adopting the percentages of local levy to be borne by each class of real property and personal property for the fiscal year 2020, and setting the residential exemption percentage for the 2020 fiscal year. You want to
Yes, thank
presentation?
you.
No.
Gary McCabe for the Board of Assessors. Thank you for the opportunity to come back this evening following the classification hearing to ask you to consider voting on two matters. First being the percentage of residential exemption that you would like to adopt, and that's how your vote should be. We adopt the percent, given percent of residential exemption. And the second vote we'd ask that you take is on tax classification. And what I'm hoping, so that we're in compliance with the requirements of this vote, that you would use the language for this vote that I provided, hoping that your selection is included in the material that I provided. The vote actually has to be on the selected residential factor. And the reason for that is that's the way the law is structured. It's working in conjunction with the commercial factor, which is a little bit easier to explain, the 1.70, 1.71, 1.72, that sort of thing. But the vote should be the residential factor.
And the residential factor is the inverse of the residential shift.
Effectively, yes.
Right, okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the votes or any additional questions you may have about the material that we presented at the hearing last week.
I apologize, but where is our vote language? I remember seeing it
sent those
somewhere.
along,
There was another document that Gary had
after the
sent
hearing.
in,
and I have
This-
a copy.
this one here.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So they were not in the original hearing booklet, but they were sent along following the hearing when it was clearer what options might be available. I do have a copy.
No,
There we go.
I provided.
Okay, now, our current residential exemption is 21%, and our current residential shift or shift is 1.72, which equals a residential factor of 0.91456. Why don't we talk in terms of residential shift, and then we can convert it back to the residential factors, just so it's easier to say as well as understand. Any thoughts on, we're starting out with the residential exemption. Okay. Any thoughts on the residential exemption, taking into consideration Mr. Benka's thoughts?
I was just wondering if Gary, if you have anything to add or respond to, or does that sound right what Mr. Benka presented? I'm not a disinterested party as a renter myself.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Mr. Banker's comments. I think they're accurate. With one exception, I'll get into that. And I enjoyed his participation in this debate over the years, very knowledgeable, and I think his insight and analysis contributes to a better informed decision. The one part I'm not sure about from my perspective is our property tax is passed along to a renter of an apartment building. That's a contractual relationship between the renter and the building owner or the landowner. And as Mr. Baker referenced, it is in the standard lease, but it has to be exercised. It's not automatic. If a renter agrees to that, then all or part of their portion of the property tax, they're responsible for it. We do not have the data to say how many apartment units are faced with paying part or all of the property tax liability for that real estate. My understanding in working with many of the large property owners in Brookline is that there's a trend towards moving some of those expenses like property tax to the tenant because the market will bear that. But again, I don't know how many renters are in that position. The second thing I've learned, I'm not sure if Mr. Benker mentioned or not, but in many of our apartment renters are seniors. And I am concerned about seniors' ability to pay increases in rent or beyond in property tax. But again, I don't have the data on that. Senior or any other renter are not eligible for tax relief programs within the property tax system we have in town. They can't come into our office and apply for relief. They don't own the property, and you have to be the owner to apply for relief. So there is an area there of residents in town who may or may not be subject to increases in property taxes directly. That's my only concern. But I do agree that the residential exemption shifts the property tax relief that the residential exemption, the qualified taxpayers are getting to those that are not qualified, including in large part the apartments, absolutely. As far as the residential condominiums, which is our predominant class, we have over 10,000 residential condominiums in Brookline. Almost half of those are not owner occupied. So there's someone you would think who lives out of town and is renting out that unit. That's why they don't live there. I think increasingly those are investors in Brookline real estate. Not just someone who's moved out of the unit and decided to hang on to it and rent it out. I think that's the most traditional scenario. You know, you live there, but you didn't sell it when you bought a single family home, you rent it out. What we're seeing is more and more outside buyers in those units. So the owner doesn't live in Brooklyn, the tenant lives in Brooklyn. And so they don't apply for residential exemption, and if they did, they wouldn't qualify for it, right? So that's the other side of this, that the owner would get, doesn't get relief. We don't know for sure that they're passing that additional tax on, even on the condominium units.
Now, wouldn't those condos tend to have a lease term that's greater than a year? And the rent would be fixed until the end of the term, at which point any tax increase would be factored in.
I would
do we
agree
not
with
know
that, Chairman Green, I would agree with that, but we don't know what the terms of that individual agreement are.
Yeah.
Is there a pass-through in that lease? I only know anecdotally that there appears to be more and more landowners or unit owners checking the box, so to speak, and saying, you're gonna pay the increase in taxes, if not the entire tax.
Yeah, so there's a lot we don't know.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Do you have any data or anything to indicate that landlords would, if they didn't have to pay as much tax, they would actually reduce the rent? If there were no lease provision, which you seem to suggest there's not that many about, I mean, the lease
I
provisions
understand the question.
assume an escalation. If there's a lessening, a de-escalation, what happens?
Again, there's a contract between the parties, the owner of the building and the lessee of the unit. That can change, as Jim Green points out, as you renew those leases. It's the standard lease, I don't believe, has a reduction provision if property taxes go down. I don't believe that's the case. Commercial property, it does. I commonly see that in retail or office space, but for residential housing, I have not seen that. I can tell you that there are many apartment building owners in Brookline who have owned those buildings for a very long time. They're very stable ownership, long-term ownership in this town, and we know who these people are. They take it, I can tell you, they take it upon themselves, not necessarily to increase rent on people they feel can't afford to pay the increase in rent. I've heard that from them time and time again. They don't just increase everybody's rent because they can. Now, does that mean those same landowners that we have in Brookline would reduce the taxes? I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that they're very careful about increasing rents on long-term tenants that they have a relationship with, that they want to maintain that relationship.
So I agree with the comments of Mr. McCabe and Mr. Benka. I just want to make sure the board understands that in addition to the residential exemption percentage affecting folks who fall under the break point, the amount of tax they pay, it also affects where the break point is. So if you take $1,000 as sort of the average increase in taxes we're talking about across single-family and two-family condo and three-family, a residential exemption of 20% puts the break point at about $2.312 million. If you go up to 21%, it increases by $1,000. So I just want to underscore the point that by selecting the residential exemption percentage, you're affecting the break point in addition to the amount of the exemption for those that fall under the break point.
And when you say break point, you mean the amount by which the residential exemption stops being beneficial to a homeowner?
Correct. The point at which you actually pay less than your property tax versus more.
Yes.
You know, I think this is a very interesting discussion and clearly something we should be considering. But I believe we should be considering it for the future because we had the tax classification hearing last week. We're getting new information now, and it's really not, there's no opportunity for the public to comment on this new information. And so, in that sense, I think that the timing is off. I'm sorry that Mr. Benka was not able to present last week, but at least to give us this information during the comment period so that we could put it out online, et cetera. So I think also, as I say, I have concerns about whether if we did lower the residential exemption, whether the increase or the decrease in taxes would be passed on to the renters. And that really concerns me. Because then what that means is that we are then, increasing the profits of landlords. And I don't think that's what we should be in the business of doing in this very complicated tax scenario here. So I think given those things, I believe we should consider this information in next year's.
Yeah, I agree, although I think that to the extent that Ms. Benka's information is information that is persuasive, we can still consider that in determining our residential exemption amount. But I think there's another reason why what you say is correct, and we ought to look at this in the future, is that we don't know anything, right? I mean, we don't know, we don't know, how many leases have these provisions, how they're implemented, what time period. We also don't know anything about the elasticity of demand for rental units. So, until we know a lot more information than we do now, we can't really make a judgment based on that concern. So, any other questions, comments?
I would just say only that it's for each one, I can't unhear it. It's only for up to each one of us to consider it and add whatever weight we want to it.
Right, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
At the end of the day, the pie remains the same of how much revenue we collect.
Right.
And the exemptions are just kind of where to distribute the pie. I hope it's chocolate pie. I was very persuaded by Mr. Benka's statements. I think traditionally this board has not been renters, so I could see why you may not be looking at how that fell. And we don't have the data, and I'm not exactly sure how we would collect it without a lot of manual labor. But I think that when costs go up, people find a way to pass those costs along.
But
My question was, where the costs are kind of buried in the whole, operating budget of the apartment. would the decrease be passed along as well?
I highly doubt that. People charge what they can,
Yeah, so that's what, that concerns
what they
me.
can
But it
get
may
away
help
with.
future increases, or at least lessen future increases in some way, perhaps.
Perhaps.
So it sounds like this proposal's on the table to stay at the current 21% and a sense to go down to the 20%. My channeling the theoretical conversation down to the...
You can assume that, yes,
Okay.
but it's always the case that the status quo is an option for us, so.
Okay.
Is that your option?
I would be comfortable going down to 20%
Really?
in light of the comments.
Okay.
It's up to the chair to
Are you voting
decide
or are
how it's
you
gonna-
asking questions? What?
Despite what I think would be fair and equitable, I think going down to 20% in one step could cause a lot of tax shock for condo owners. I don't know, Gary, I mean, you can get some idea by looking at sheet 2.
Mhm.
If I were gonna go down, I would probably not go down the whole amount. What I was concerned about is that if you just look at condos versus single-family homes, you think, oh, we should increase the residential exemption. And what I was hoping to point out was that there was an impact on renters that would mitigate against doing that. So with that comment.
Okay.
There's also one other issue. I always look at the amount of levy we're leaving on the table. And in this case, you know, on the 21%, the factor of 1.75 and 1.725 are the two where we leave the least amount on the table, and you know, there's not much of a spread between the residential and the CIP rates. Whereas if you look at the 20%, well, only one comes below, but the others are quite a bit over. So only the 1.73 doesn't leave as much on the table. So, I mean, to me, that's, you know, we want to tax, we have to tax to the maximum levy we can because we need the revenue. It's, you know, as simple as that.
So this is not-
Comment that
yeah.
the information that you're looking at does not include 20.5% residential exemption. If that's something you're interested in looking at for next year, we could certainly include that information, but it was not presented in this material. So not only is that a different factor, but it changes all the other factors.
Right, exactly.
As Mr. Franco pointed out, when you move one thing, other things move. And so I don't know what your vote would be on the classification at 20.5% residential exemption. We'd have to make some stab at it and true it up later. It's not ideal, but you know, it's manageable if you really want to do that. I do not have those numbers.
Well, I do think, again, for the benefit of the public, that it's important to have that information at our original hearing. And as I say, I think that, you know, Mr. Baker has a good point, although I'm nervous about this issue of, you know, we'll lower it and then and the decrease in rent in apartments will not be passed on to the tenants, and only those who pay taxes directly would be harmed. So that gives me some pause, and I'd rather have the data. I think the data is crucial.
The other comment I'd like to make is the hearing last week went an hour and 15 minutes. If you added more data to the presentation, it's going to be a longer hearing, no question.
That's just life.
I enjoyed it. That was great.
But, you know, we didn't focus on the non-residential exemption
Yeah.
impact of condo. And if we did, and we have that data certainly, then you could interpret that data from what you have. But to present it would be another, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes.
So I'd like to try to come to a conclusion on the residential exemption amount. We can stay at
21.
21. go down to 20 or go up some distance. Is anyone interested in going up?
Beyond 21%?
Yes. Okay, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
So, so it's between staying at the current status quo of 21% or reducing it somewhere below that. Why don't we vote this way? All in favor of maintaining the amount at 21%, say aye. Mr. Franco?
No.
Ms. Hamilton? I'm sorry, Ms. Heller.
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
No.
And chair votes aye. So we're 21% status quo. Next, we go to the residential factor. Anyone have any thoughts on what we ought to do with that? Again, this is a shifting of the cost of the payment of the levy between different entities in town, residents versus the commercial, industrial, and personal property taxpayers. Anyone have any thoughts?
I do.
Yeah.
So as I said, I always look at the actual levy and the excess that we're leaving on the table. And in two cases, we're leaving pretty similar amounts. And if you look up at the total taxable values, which is residential, of those two categories, that is 1.75, 1.725, you'll see that the residential has a 3-cent difference, and the CIP has more like almost a 25% difference. But the spread between residential and CIP is less in the 1.725 and the 1.75. So on balance, I would go with the 1.725 because of the fact that there's less spread.
Any other thoughts? And remember, our current residential shift is 1.72.
I concur with Ms. Heller.
Same.
Okay, that's 3 votes right there.
Could you explain that a little more clearly? I couldn't.
Okay, Ms. Heller, can you explain that?
Okay, so, let me see if I get this mic over here a little closer.
There's
No, they're not
there's
for
no
them.
amplification in this room.
Okay.
It's for TV.
So Gary, you'll correct me if I misspeak. So I always look at the amount of the levy and how much we're not taxing ourselves to the exact levy limit. How much in other words, how much excess we have and we're leaving it on the table. And in this case, there are two categories where we're leaving approximately $21,000 of levy that we're not using, but that's a very small amount. In the other cases of the other factors, we're leaving we would either be leaving too much on the table or we would be going over our levy, which I don't think we really can do.
Which is our current
Right.
shift.
So really, we only have 3 choices, and in 2 of them, four choices. 2 of them involve leaving 20 or 21,000 on the table, and the other involves leaving 56 or 58,000. And that's, in my judgment, is not a good idea. We should stick to the lower amount, leaving the lower, not taxing ourselves only to leave $20,000 on the table. Is that right? Okay. So then I look up at the line which talks about the residential tax rates versus the combined tax rates. The residential tax rates in those two are only 3 cents apart. The combined rates, however, are almost 25 cents apart. So I would go with a lower commercial tax rate and the 3 cent higher residential rate, because that brings them closer together, and it feels to me more fair.
So the final number is 21%?
21% and a factor of 1.725.
Okay, I see 3 people interested in that one. How about you, Mr. Franco?
I concur.
Okay.
1.75.
Okay, so I hereby move that the select board vote to adopt a residential factor of .917210, which represents a CIP factor of 1.725, and the following corresponding tax rates: residential 9.45 and commercial 15.53. Note the excess levy capacity is $21,602. All in favor, or any questions, or? All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So you got your votes.
Thank you.
Good, okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you put into this and your thoughtful votes. I'm going to be sending, as a follow-up, some paperwork to sign on this, and I'll bring that to you for the town administrator.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your hard work on
Thank
this,
you.
Yes.
Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Dick.
You want these
Yes,
books
thank you,
back
Dick.
here?
Excuse me?
You want the books back?
No, you hang on to them.
You got 15 minutes to
Yeah.
get everything else done.
Okay, where's mine?
Great, thanks to you too.
Irving Allen first, next.
Okay.
I don't
So
think
next,
it's more than 5 or 10 minutes on that.
okay. Next is interview of candidates for boards and commissions, the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission, Mr. Irving Allen. Step up to the board, to the table. No, at the
Sit at the
microphone.
table.
Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Diversity Commission.
Well, I've been a Brookline resident since 1969, homeowner since '74. There was a time in the distant past, in the '70s, '80s, and early in the '90s, where I was very involved in Brookline affairs. That was mainly through the auspices of Brookline Black Citizens. I've been relatively quiet since then, having succumbed to the demands of my profession. I'm a retired psychiatrist with a private practice for many years here in Brookline or in Brighton, and a Harvard University retiree. A few months ago, when the affairs involving the firemen and policemen were happening, and there were a couple of select meetings that I attended, I was appalled watching and listening to the citizen concerns that were expressed, which in many instances involved a sense of blatant distrust and dissatisfaction with the town, the services being offered, and whether people were being listened to. So that was probably the beginning of developing for me an interest. I've been fully retired for 2 years, and I can no longer say I don't have time. Civic responsibilities. I wish I had been able to continue from the 90s. I will admit to some disillusionment with what we talked about in the 80s and 90s and the way things were handled involving, many of you probably weren't around then, but very disturbing things around Brookline High, kids' academic progress. There were issues with the police department into the 90s. And I was fairly disillusioned, so I wasn't motivated to keep involved. But I certainly can now, and I'm interested.
So in your application, you don't mention that you're a psychiatrist, retired psychiatrist, which seems to me to be sort of a critical piece of information in terms of this position. Is there a reason? Do you think
Did I
that,
wait and mention it?
all right.
Well, I guess if I had a format to put information you wanted, I'd certainly would include it. Being a psychiatrist for 50 years certainly shapes one's opinions and attitudes about things. So that was a bad omission, I would say. I got surprised to hear.
Any other questions?
So you give a response to one question about what would you like to see this board or commission address? What issue would you like to see the board or commission address? And you respond, improved employment. Can you just go about what you meant by improved employment? What's sort of behind that statement?
Well, I think it would be nice to see, given where Brookline is in the greater Boston community, for me anyway, it would be nice to see a greater sense of diversity in all respects in Brookline, not just people working for the town, but people in general in the business community and the entire community. I can't say as long as I've been here, I can't say I have a feeling at home. I'm glad I live in Brookline compared to any other suburban town around here, but it's not really home either. Incidents, omissions, ignorings still happen.
Do you have any ideas on how to make Brookline feel more like home to you? So I take what you say seriously about you feel perhaps that you don't belong here or that you're not welcome. But how do we get to remedying that?
Well, I think for me personally, in applying to be on this commission, I think my first step is to get up to speed and see what people have been doing and are doing. I went to the web, actually studied the website. It looks like there's some interesting initiatives going on. I'm not aware that they have been going on, so I don't know what impact they're having on citizens at large. And given what I said about the meeting months ago, that's disturbing. There seems to be a lot of disillusionment with the way Brookline functions.
Any other questions?
How did you stumble upon this particular role? Did someone approach you, or did you just go on the town website?
Conversations with various people. I come from a political family in South Bend, Indiana. So it's always been in my bones to be more involved. I chose a profession that wasn't automatically linked to public service or to politics. I had my moments, but this feels like something I should be doing. It's late in life to be doing it, but better late than never. I hope I bring a lot of experience to this. But like I said, I need to get up to speed with people who've already been on the commission and doing various other things. I read about something I had no awareness of, the GARE initiative, and I don't know where that's at. And I figure if I don't know what that's about, there are a lot of people who don't know what that's about. And that can be useful to understanding that and saying something about it.
So, any other questions? No? We're not going to vote tonight, but we'll vote at, I don't know, probably our next meeting, and then you'll be notified. Thank you for interviewing. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So next, new entertainment license. Looks like these are,
These are all the housekeeping ones
Yeah.
that we're trying to update. They're all basic radio, TV within the restaurant. They've been going on for a long time. So I would recommend just an omnibus vote to approve the entertainment licenses to comport with our records.
I see the police have approved all of them, so that's critical. Any questions?
I just want to make sure, this is for the remainder of 2019, or it's for the
19.
Okay.
You will renew all these licenses next week. But before you did that, we wanted to get them
Okay,
updated and
Yep.
straightened out.
okay, perfect.
So we'll... Okay, all in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Night, aye. Sorry.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Authorization to hire police. Chief Lipson. Question of authorizing the filing of the following vacancies in the police department. 1, chief emergency telecommunications dispatcher. 2, emergency telecommunications dispatchers marijuana mitigation fund positions. 3, parking control officers, 2 positions contingent on the closing of town meeting, and it better close soon. 4, patrol officers, 3 positions contingent on the closing of town meeting. Actually, the marijuana mitigation fund positions are also contingent on closing town meeting.
Oh, no, that's what these are. So the marijuana mitigation fund positions are these.
Oh,
these
okay,
3 and
okay,
4.
I'm sorry.
The dispatchers are not related to marijuana mitigation.
Okay. So, Chief Lipson, have anything to say?
Good evening. You've read them very well. I have a request, and I won't repeat them again, but just as the town administrator said, so 3 of the 4 patrol officer positions are as a result of the marijuana impact funds, and 2 of the 3 parking control officers are as a result of those funds.
No, 3 of the 4.
Contingent on the close of town meeting.
All right. Okay, any questions? Okay, I move approval of authorizing the filing of, or the filling of the following vacancies in the police department as read before. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Next, also Chief Lipson. Question of authorizing the hiring of 7 applicants to be student officers for the upcoming Cambridge Police Academy beginning on January 6, 2020. Marcus Hetnick Jr., Matthew E. Kelleher, Batad Johnson, Douglas Yu, Shannon Goodrich, and Michael Davis. By the way, it says 7 applicants, but only 6 names.
Joseph Capuccio should be there.
Okay, Joseph, how do you spell his last name?
Capuccio,
He's on our, on the online, the
Oh, on-
packet information.
Okay, so
So we probably should add him. It's just missing on the agenda.
I'm stuck in 20th century technology there. Okay, you want to,
So several months ago, these were the same names that I appeared before the board to request their appointment, conditional officers, conditional offers of employment. So they've proceeded through the process. The academy begins in January, and their acceptance to the academy is contingent on passing a pre-academy physical abilities test.
good. Any questions? Okay, I move approval of the, authorizing the hiring of 7 applicants as student officers for the upcoming police academy. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Approval of West Metro Home Consortium. Question of approving the agreement by and between the town of Brookline and city of Newton, acting as lead entity for the West Metro Home Consortium.
Exactly. This agreement is between the town and the city of Newton. They act as the administrator for home funds.
Yeah.
This agreement, if executed, authorized by the board for you to execute, would allow us to utilize our fiscal 20 home funds. Our plan for fiscal 20 home funds this year is actually to work with the Housing Authority on their rental assistance demonstration grant as they look to renovate their units at 90 Longwood, their Morse apartments. So we're seeking the board's approval for you to execute the agreement on behalf of the town.
Any questions?
I think it's a
Hearing
great
none.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, right.
This is ongoing. I mean, we've been in this
Yeah.
West Metro.
Yes, every year we get funding,
Yeah.
so we always
It's not,
do.
it's not new.
Nope.
Yeah, okay. I move approval. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Great,
Thank you. Okay, what are you here for? Let's see. Authorizing the hire, planning, okay. Question of authorizing the filling of the following vacancies in the planning department, economic development, long-term planner, zoning coordinator, planner. Yes, this time.
Correct. Karen Martin, who had previously been zoning coordinator and was then became economic development long-term planner, has left to go back to New York. So that leaves that vacancy. And our zoning coordinator, Charlotte Lease, was unfortunately only with us for a few months, but she's off to a neighboring community. So we'd like to fill the positions as quickly as possible.
Any questions? I move approval of filling the following vacancies in the planning department, economic development, long-term planner, zoning coordinator, planner. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Warrant articles.
Okay, so I don't know if you have this.
Oh,
This
God.
is Article 34.
That was supposed to be simple housekeeping.
I know. And a lot of
Wait, are we
Yeah.
being asked to
Nothing has
reconsider?
been simple.
Maybe we can.
So we can do this at the table.
Okay.
This is the petitioner's revised motion, and also a red line version of that motion, from what originally was filed, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our meeting,
Wow.
or this meeting, next town meeting.